going on, everybody? Welcome to podcast episode 27. Going to be discussing all things HaulPay today. Just before we get into today's show, we got to discuss the EF routing top hauls of the week. Coming in at number one for the best load of the week for vans, we got an Indiana to PA, averaging between 2.4 and 2.9 a mile. Got a Wisconsin to PA, getting close to $3 a mile on the top end. Indiana to PA for reefer, getting in, pretty close to dry van rates. A little surprising to me, to be honest. Another Indiana to PA, getting closer to 3.43 on the top end. Flatbed's going to be North Carolina's ruling it this week, coming in between 3 and 3.6 almost, and close to $4 a mile out to Baltimore, which is pretty average for what I'm seeing as well. Got the best loop for dry van coming out of the West Coast, pretty much staying in the West Coast for the whole week, getting to 10 grand gross on the top end of about a week's worth of work there, which is honestly pretty solid for the West. I guess the West is working these days. Going into reefer, we got Houston to Denver, Denver to Chicago, Chicago to Milwaukee, finishing back off in Houston, again, 7 to 10 grand average on about a week's worth of work. Wrapping it up with the best loop for flatbed. As I said, the South is going to be where you want to be with flatbeds, coming in between 7 and 9 grand on about 6 days. Let's get into today's show with HaulPay. Going to end up starting with our mystery guest first. What is going on, Dan?
Hey, thrilled to be here, Alex. Thanks for having us.
Man. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for setting this up, being, kind of the reason this all happened today.
Yeah, super happy to make the connection. You're clearly plugged in with a lot of influential people, and slowly but surely I'm making all these different connections through you and your team. So it's been fantastic.
Yeah, it's been cool. I was actually discussing the podcast with somebody recently and just said, man, I feel like I pushed a little snowball off of a cliff and it's just collecting things as it's going down that hill, because like people are joining the team, things are happening, shows are getting booked weeks in advance. And I was like, man, I remember starting this in my bedroom. I didn't know what was going to happen, but that snowball is just collecting stuff, man. Let's put it that way.
Asset-based army.
Yeah. We got the POD asset-based army out here. But I want to get into stuff with you. Like, how did this originally happen? I want to discuss, where did we get the HaulPay show from?
Yeah, so Sean Matthews, probably one of the best connected guys in the business, working behind the scenes. He had filled out a form inquiring about like some sort of, it was a general form on our website. So I reached out, we connected, and he's got an agent, a brokerage. So it wasn't really the best fit, but we just kept talking about how big of an issue there is with getting carriers paid quickly, how many times remittance issues they're coming into play. And one thing led to another. He gave us an introduction. Here we are.
Yeah, I mean, there's been obviously some pain points in the past 2 to 3 years on the carrier side regarding payment, especially the speed of which payment occurs. And I think that's actually a pretty great topic to discuss, because everybody keeps talking that there's no money and there's no good loads. But when you do finally find a good load or you're hauling freight, sometimes you're not getting paid for it. And net 60, net 90, it can cripple a carrier in this
Absolutely.
market for sure.
100%.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I want to get into some HaulPay stuff. What are we going to do here?
I think we should bring in the Grand Poobah, the chief. Talk.
You want to give him a
HaulPay.
quick introduction? Who are we bringing on?
Yeah, we got Steve Kochan, president and founder of HaulPay, also formerly known as Comfreight.
Beautiful. Let's get Steve in here. How's it going, Steve? You're on mute. Don't worry, I did that last show. I did a whole intro on mute. I literally talked to the camera for a minute straight on mute, so don't feel bad about
it. Yeah, man, nice to meet you. It's great to connect. Dan's only said positive things, and yeah, I'm more than happy to give you some more information about the history of the company and what we're doing with payments and all the other stuff with factoring that tends to be a most loved and hated thing in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things where people say they don't use it, but everybody uses it. It's kind of been one of those things. But Dan, I will let you go get to where you need to get to, and me and Steve will get into the whole HaulPay thing.
Fantastic. Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it again, bro.
Take care.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, man. I want to get into it straight with you. I mean, we got some limited time here. How did you get into logistics? I mean, what was your first exposure? What was your start in the logistics industry?
Yeah, so my start in the logistics industry actually was at everyone's favorite company, C.H. Robinson.
Oh, nice. That's actually one of my favorite companies when I was a kid.
Okay, good. Yeah, I say that jokingly because people either love them or they hate them. So
yeah, I love them. I absolutely
yeah,
love them.
they've changed over the years for sure. And I grew up mostly around Long Beach, California. So I at some point in the past I even had family that were working in the port. So port trucking, intermodal, all the stuff related to freight. It's not something that was ever alien to me, right? But actually working in the industry didn't really happen until I actually got a job at C.H. Robinson. So I thought I was just going to go work there for a few years and then go back to grad and like go get an MBA and go to grad school. And then the rest was history. I actually got my job there. It's kind of funny, right in the middle of the financial crisis in 08. So that was also very interesting. Kind of see like this crazy freight market, like as your intro to the job, and kind of had to work both sides of the broker desk, so to speak.
It's funny though, because that topic keeps coming up in the past few shows where people reminisce on the 08 market. And from the general consensus I've got from the older guys in the industry is that it wasn't like that bad, right? Because stuff still had
it wasn't. Actually, it surprisingly wasn't that bad. I mean, I think financial services got hit the hardest, right? In that recession.
I mean, I think the freight was still moving, but payments were just
that was the biggest. That I can tell you for a fact, like that was the biggest thing when like we were prospecting or like running credit on new customers. The way C.H. Robinson works, they had like this Chicago branch. I don't know if they still have that as the hub for credit, but they were like the credit desk. So if anything didn't come back right away, it went through a longer process, and you could just see like by the end of 08 going into 09, like almost every new customer submitted went through a really long credit process where they're really nitpicking about everything, really doing a deep dive because they're probably watching a lot of their AR turn into write-offs across the branch network. So but it was definitely, freight kept moving, the supply chain kept moving. I think that was one of the reasons I kind of was kind of liked it even more, was that it is kind of a critical part of the economy, and getting to see it at a natural level, outside of just like the port of LA and Long Beach, and seeing it, it's pretty cool. It's
funny though, because most people that get into logistics have the same kind of story. They're like, "Oh, I was just gonna do it as a pass-through job," and then people do it for like 50 more years.
Yeah,
so once you're in, you're just kind of in, bro. Like.
Yeah, I mean, I actually talked to some of the execs at Robinson at the time because the branch I worked at was a company that they had just acquired, so we actually had like the CEO came through there at the time. A couple of senior VPs were spending a lot of time on site, so I actually got to talk to the guys every once in a while, run into them at the water cooler, and be like, "Hey, how'd you get into this industry?" And I swear, dude, every single one of them the same way. It was like, I was kind of picked it up and started working there. I was doing my schooling or whatever. And
most people like fresh out of college or still in college, and then as soon as they get out, they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna do this weird logistics thing for like a year, pay some bills, get on my feet," and then it's like they have like a 44-year career after. So I've heard that one many, many times. I mean, what was your role at CH? What were you handling kind of day to day?
Yeah, I was an account manager. So the branch, I think the title was less interesting than the fact that particular branch was a very special branch. It was an air freight company that they had purchased. And I think literally the first C.H. Robinson hire after they acquired that company. So it was like the newest branch on the C.H. Robinson branch network that they had bought to bring on this like air freight forwarding capability. That was really important to them strategically because it affected how they were listed on like the stock market. So Yeah, it was just very strategic for them. And a lot of the accounts, because it was mostly air freight forwarding, were high value freight, right? Because most of the time when you're moving high value freight, it's going to go team or it's going to go with an actual aircraft, right? So I kind of got a crash course in high value freight. A lot of the accounts that I was managing, I kind of trying to do expansion and upselling into were like the high end electronics accounts, right? Like Samsung, LG. I
Yeah.
didn't sell those accounts, but I had to do a lot of the day-to-day ops and account management
So
and
this
a
was
lot
the
of
type of freight where once you get loaded, they tell you don't stop for 200 miles. You just keep
yeah.
driving.
I have some funny stories about that too that involve like conference calls with the FBI and all kinds of weird
Yeah, we have
freight
actually a
freight.
bit near the end of the show is your craziest logistics story, so you can kind of mull
I'll
that
save
over.
something for that. Yeah, but yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. So it was a really good experience. I worked there for 2 years. I went back to Eden Prairie, got a crash course on all their TMS stuff, and when I came back, I found myself teaching a lot of the staff members of the company they just acquired how to use the TMS. So, for 6 months in, I kind of was pretty in the deep end right out of the gate.
Yeah, so you're saying CH was playing chess, not checkers, bro. Like they were just buying stuff. They were playing a game out there with the purchasing.
Oh yeah, yeah. They weren't just buying it for the revenue; they were buying it for things to help their stock ticker. It seemed like every time they did an acquisition around that time and a few years after that, with the CEO they had back then at the time, it was multiple reasons for it, and it was very well thought out.
Yeah, that's cool. So what did you do after CH? What was your next step?
Yeah, I got actually recruited away from Robinson by a customer of mine at the time who was doing freight forwarding and basically say, hey, can you head up my domestic operations and help manage that, get the carrier network going, and so then so that was great because now I'm like, all right, well, I got to build this brokerage network for this startup brokerage, and now I go from having all the resources you can have in the world to a spreadsheet and a bunch of shitty LTL login portals, that I got to go get an LTL code. I got to go to 15 different websites, right? And this was
There you
about
go.
2010, 2011 in that time range. So, it's still, there's like I don't know if get loaded. There's actually a load board that's, if anybody knows what that is, then they're probably dating themselves too. But I think they merged in with Dad or something like that
Yeah, I was
later
gonna
on.
say like that name seems pretty strong, man. If they didn't merge into something, I'm kind of surprised it died off. Like,
I honestly, I do remember who it was. I just can't remember right now. But yeah, so yeah, it was just kind of like that was kind of the thing for a while. I did that for a couple of years, and then um, basically just wanted to start doing something my own. I had some previous small businesses I had started, mostly working on like cars and stuff while I was going to college for my undergrad. So I was always kind of like missed having my own small business. And then I just noticed again the big difference between the amount of tech and financial capabilities I had at Robinson versus like being a startup brokerage or a new broker, right? So it's just such a
yeah,
big gulf that I thought to myself, there's got to be something I could do here. Start a business around potentially, or just build a piece of software that will help alleviate some of these challenges.
it's funny you
With that
mentioned that,
difference.
like that whole jump, because I started my career in a very big company, and I found the most success and I felt the most at home in like very, very small carrier operations. And my tools were literally like Google Sheets and a cell phone. Like
Yeah,
it
right.
works though. Like you can make it work if you needed to, but it's
Yeah,
definitely not an ideal situation.
exactly. And that's exactly, there's just like financial services too is, you're very limited. And again, this is also still kind of coming out of the financial crisis, right? So
Yeah.
it was just like it kind of like threw me into this position. I was like, okay, like this is probably something I could maybe build something around or improve on, and that's kind of where the beginning of everything started with
Yeah,
building
okay, so let's get
software.
into it then. Let's get into what are you doing now, and I guess the more broad question, what is HaulPay for people that might not know?
Yeah, so the company actually started under the brand Comfreight, which some of you might have heard of before. It was mostly a load board, but it's evolved into more of a focus on payments, finance, and credit. HaulPay is really basically like a digital factoring and payments platform. So that means invoice factoring, uh, automating payments, automating invoicing, collections, and credit terms, right? All that kind of goes into like mitigating your freight credit risk, maybe improving your credit score, right? And all of it tend to tie back to either getting paid on time or paying your vendors or your contracted carriers or drivers on time. So all those things are connected, and they all make up what we like to think of as like the financial platform of services for the industry. And that's really what we focus on as our core focus now.
So you don't have to answer this question, but just because I was a carrier that used like multiple factoring services, what would you say are your direct competitors? Like, what is that market? Like, what does it look like? You know?
Yeah, I think I'll like the biggest, most obvious one or at least obvious to us that would maybe put things into perspective for people would be like Triumph Business Capital.
Yeah. Okay. So
Right.
that's
Or
what I thought. So like
Yes.
Triumph, Wex, like the general ones that people know about.
Yeah, I think Triumph's a good one to point out because we're not at the scale that they are. They're an actual
No,
chartered
of
bank.
course.
Yeah, they're an actual bank. Triumph Bank Corp actually owns Triumph Business Capital. Triumph.
You guys got like a legitimate brick and
Yeah.
mortar bank to deal with.
They're an actual pretty well, great execution, great team running them at an executive level, fantastic story. But as far as like the suite of offerings and what we bring to the table, we bring to the table maybe a little bit better software, same or similar offerings for factoring, payments. Like Triumph Pay, for example, doesn't work with brokers of certain sizes. So we're able to work with smaller mid-market brokers, give them basically the same or better services or capabilities, even if they might not be in the top 20 or top 200 in brokers by volume, which is really what Triumph is targeting primarily in their strategic
that's
plan.
actually. So I want to talk about that with you for a second, because like I said, I've used like factoring for my whole career on the carrier side. That's just the type of carriers that I was working at. Triumph doesn't accept a lot of people. Like, they put a lot of restrictions, especially on smaller sized operations. So are you guys able to actually get smaller sized? I'm not saying are you able to get a guy with 5 days of his authority approved, but I mean, are you guys a little bit more flexible? Do you take a more human approach?
We can actually, we have. Yeah. So I mean, like we've built our own tech to help kind of mitigate some of the risks that come with newer authorities. And we definitely prefer, like, if it's a broker who's factoring with us or with payments, that they've at least have been around for a few months, and we have some kind of paper trail or traceable history for them as a business person. So there's some things that we do to kind of mitigate our risk of fraud, even on the front end of things. But technology really helps us provide a better equal capability to one of these bigger platforms.
But I think in this market and in this, I mean, just in 2024 in our daily life, I think a lot of people are straying like a bit further from the huge corporations, and they like that boutique kind of like white glove service. And I think the guys, the companies that are putting in that little bit of extra effort and kind of caring about the customer slightly more, because once you get to a certain size, you just can't keep that level of where you started at. It just kind of becomes its own beast.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I started the company as a software company. It's in the DNA. We're a small team, but we're really efficient for the amount of product and stuff we put out. And we're very nimble and agile because of that. So we have features and capabilities that some of the larger groups don't have. And a lot of the larger groups are built as financial institutions, and the technology part is an afterthought or it's subbed out, right? So that also makes a big difference, like from the way we run the business, and we plan to continue to in the future. And our core strategy
you have the asset
tech.
of being in trucking and actually understanding logistics. You're not a tech company that wasn't boots on the ground. You didn't start as a tech company. You earned your stripes before you came into the whole tech. Because you're not like one of those tech bros who just came in with no experience.
No, definitely not. I definitely can rock the tech bro hat, but
Hey, we got a question from Eric here. So when factors won't extend credit to a shipper on specific customers, what other options would they have?
Yeah, sure. So it depends on what type of business you are, right? So if you are a carrier or it depends on the size of the business too, right? So you can find other financing options. I guess to clarify the question, it's really a matter of like, do you need the accelerated cash flow for that specific shipper, or are you working with multiple companies too? So there's a lot of different ways to look at this. You could look at this from the perspective of, I need to get faster cash flow on my business, and you can look at it as a blended across the whole business. So like, all right, maybe I can't get credit approved for that shipper, but they will approve credit for another shipper or another
I
company.
think if I'm not wrong, the question is if he's a shipper and he needs credit from a customer, unless I'm reading it wrong. I mean,
yeah, I was a little confused about credit to a shipper on specific customers, because most so there's definitely traditional trade finance or factoring companies that will buy purchase orders from shippers customers who, I'm delivering 100 pallets of whatever, premix or something. I don't want to wait for my customer to pay me. That's a purchase order finance factoring transaction that can be handled by a myriad of small business finance companies that do that kind of financing. If it's a shipper that's looking for freight credit, like I'm a shipper, I need to move this freight and I can't get my credit approved for some reason, then this also happens to brokers a lot, especially new brokers. Is one of the things we help new freight brokers with. Is they're new, they don't have a lot of age in their authority, and they don't have a lot of payment history under that authority or that under that business entity. You can offer to quick pay whoever your vendor is, whoever the party is you're paying, and oftentimes they'll extend you just a little bit of credit to let you have a shot at that, basically. And they'll report that payment performance to the credit agencies. And usually within 3 to 6 months, you'll have enough history out there where you can actually start getting consistent approvals by other third-party factors, by other carriers. And then it's not going to be so limiting on what vendors you can and can't use.
yeah, it's funny you actually bring that up. So we have some community questions that I have on a sheet. How fast can a startup broker build credit, and do you have any recommendations on how to speed up that process? Because I know that's a massive issue for anybody. Even I mean, on the carrier side, it's an issue, and on the broker side, but specific to a startup broker, I mean, like you said, usually it's about 6 months till anybody's willing to even think about using you.
Yeah, definitely. So I've seen a lot of different theories. I've seen people
I like
register
the
the
use of the
authority.
word theories.
I mean, it really though. I mean, like, hey, I'll get the broker authority and just preserve it for the next 16 months, and then I'm ready to actually quit my job or whatever and go do it full time. By then, the authority is almost 2 years old, and I get more factors willing to work with me. Because I think that's one of the biggest challenges if you're a broker or a newer authority is you've got carriers, which you just said, like Alex, the beginning of this. Like we have data on it. It's like 85% of the carriers that we make payments to for brokers, about that percentage, have a factor already,
Yeah.
right? So if you're going out in the market as a broker and like, hey, I need to book freight with a carrier, probably 80%, 85% of the time, they're going to have a factoring company, and that factoring company has to approve you on credit. Otherwise, you
Yeah,
can't.
so
They're
I mean,
not
I
really.
want
They
to
may
say
not.
that, like, I want to say that
Yeah.
on this show because I think I made a LinkedIn post about it. Everybody uses factoring as like a dirty word, and everybody says that they don't use it on the carrier side, but everybody's using it on the
I
carrier
mean,
side.
we had data for years, like going back for 5 or 6 years, and it's always been around 80, 85% of the
Yeah.
carriers,
Yeah, I
especially
mean,
smaller
everybody
carriers,
wants to
right?
say that they don't need factoring, that they have a war chest, that factoring is a waste of time and money. Man, everyone's using it, and especially in a market like this, or especially if you're not, a very, very established carrier with 10 plus years of operating. I mean, factoring is
Well,
how
if you
you
get
do
and if you
business.
get a good non-recourse partner, which by the way, that's what we default to, it protects your butt if anybody goes BK or customer yours can't
Yeah, I
pay,
got a
right? So
question about that too, actually. Okay, so let's finish off. What are your quick tips
yeah,
for a new brokerage? Just open up the authority and wait,
get
wait
the
2 years.
authority as soon as you can. Like start seasoning it. Do something with it if you can. You're probably not going to get a factoring company for a while. We will, like I said, we have exceptions, right? We have certain qualifying criteria. We'll often work with a lot much newer authority brokerages, as long as they meet certain criteria. But then you'll be able to at least, let's say, finance the payment speed for your carriers, which means paying carriers also means paying factors, like we just talked about a second ago here, right?
Yeah, of course.
So if you can pay a little bit faster for the first 3 to 4 months, like, hey, every time you talk to a factoring company that's working with a particular carrier, you say, hey, I can pay you quick pay, basically. Can you give me enough credit for this first load if I promise to quick pay you? They'll usually, in our experience, do that. Okay. Some factors will not do it no matter what. And when they don't do it no matter what, they're usually hinging on the age of the authority itself. So that's just something to keep in mind. But once you've got a few factors who've given you just enough credit for maybe one load at each factor, you're approved technically at those factors for one load worth of credit. And
so I mean, your guys' selling point to the carriers should just be like, especially in this market, you should be like, guys, like we have better technology, we're approving more brokerages, like you should come work with us and you have more options. Because like the big guys, they really are putting pretty much everyone on red. And I had some experience with Wex.
Yeah, for sure.
Like Wex compared to Triumph is wild. Like Wex was approving way more brokers. And as a dispatcher, I was mad happy. I was like, cool, dude. Like,
yeah, right.
I get to move more freight. And like it was a good experience for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like we're careful. We don't have we have, like I said, we're true non-recourse. So like,
yeah, so let's get into that. I'll tee you up for that. So
definitely,
what is not, because I actually don't even know that either. So
Sure.
What is non-recourse factoring and what are the benefits of, so you guys are a non-recourse factoring?
Yeah, we default to non-recourse. So our programs out of the box for carriers and brokers are non-recourse out of the box. But if you want to do recourse, we can either do a carve out or a specific amount or allotment as recourse, or we can do a full recourse program. We're working on making that more widely available in the back half of this year. But basically, recourse versus non-recourse, not just for factoring, but for most financial services that involve like an invoice tied to them. Basically, recourse means if you're on a recourse program, I'm going to pay you for this invoice. And typically the terms will have conditions where in 60 days from now or 90 days from now, usually don't see much longer than that. If I haven't been paid by your customer, right?
Yeah.
Then you need to pay me. Yeah. And if you don't pay me, the longer you wait to pay me after that date where it becomes your problem, the more interest accrues on top of the original invoice cost. So
yeah, so I've actually had that happen to me. So I guess I already didn't know what this is. I just didn't know the name for it.
Now you know the name for what that felt like.
Yeah, like I paid my drivers, man, out of factoring money, and then they didn't get paid, and then I got minus like a blindly 10 grand like a couple months down the road. I was like, oh, that's cool, dude.
Yeah. And the other thing is most true recourse programs, which are still out there, more so for brokers than I'd say carriers these days, but for true recourse, like pure recourse programs, if there's any credit instability or issues with your customer that they bought the invoice to bill back to, that also becomes your problem, right? So you're kind of at, you're getting an advance, you're getting more cash flow, but at the end of the problem, it's still your invoice. It's still going to come back to haunt you if anything happens.
Yeah, it's going to come take the money from you when you don't expect it, and when you're maybe not prepared for it, which is kind of an issue.
And that can be very difficult, especially for a small fleet or a carrier, where all of a sudden, you owe 30K. It's like, I can't pay for 30K. I have to shut down the business, right? So that's why.
So what's this whole non-recourse thing?
Non-recourse is typically for certain conditions of the invoices, it's not your problem, right? And there's a lot of groups are advertising non-recourse, but you do have to be careful and read the fine print because it's kind of become an abuse. I'd say like an abused term. There's a lot of non-recourse programs that are like kind of non-recourse. If very specific things happen, they will not charge you back per se. In our case, the only scenarios where we would charge a customer back is a claim that is clearly something that they should have told us about up front or were aware of, claims that are not something that we had any control or insight into, right, as the factor, or some form of intentional, or even if it's accidental misrepresentation. So like you send us an invoice for $15,000 and the invoice when we go to bill it was actually for $5,000, right?
I mean, isn't
Well,
that just like purely fraud?
there's some actual accidental cases of things like that happening. We will usually catch it through our verification process in our software that automates a lot of the stuff. But I'm just giving you examples of
No,
cases
of
where
course.
these are very rare cases for us, the way our system works now. But um, if it's intentional or it's fairly obvious that it's fraud, then it's kind of like, okay, we can't fund you anymore, and you need to pay us back, et cetera, et cetera. But if there's cases where there's a claim and it's not really either any party's fault, we'll usually work out payment plans. We're very, very generous. That makes us very different. We have not seen that out there in the market at all.
Oh
So
yeah, dude. I've
yeah,
been literally, I won't name names, but like I've been told, sorry guys, the customer didn't pay. You owe me 18,000, 7,000, 6,000.
yeah, and then we're gonna
And
freeze the
on
rest of your
top of
cash
it,
flow too, right? And that's the other thing. We won't do that. Like,
yeah,
we'll let you, in
yeah.
most cases, unless there's funny business, which does happen sometimes, we'll let you keep factoring for other customers and keep getting your cash
Yeah,
flow,
no,
right?
that
We
was the
want you
thing.
to
Like
survive.
they, instead of doing stuff like that, they literally said like, you owe me 7 grand, and I'm taking it from what you just factored like 2 days ago. I was like, oh, cool. So I guess we're just missing payroll this week. Like,
Yeah,
appreciate it, man. Thanks for caring
yeah.
about
I mean,
our
look,
operation,
we're in the business to keep our customers in business,
bro. Like,
right?
they were like, we literally told them, if you guys don't reverse this, like, because they just took it, they didn't even like say anything.
Right.
And then we went to go do payroll, and we just saw this like fat minus. And we're like, guys, if you don't give that back to us and like let us do some payment terms with you, like we won't have a business to pay you back with in 5 days, So.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a lot of the, so that's really like we are in our non-recourse coverage. If there's anything to do with credit too, so meaning like your customer goes bankrupt, that's all, we stand behind that completely.
Yeah,
So
that's actually really cool. So you guys basically say like, we have, our vetting process is ours. If we buy your invoice, we bought it. Like we
yeah,
bought
we're
it.
only coming back to you if there's some funny business, and
Yeah, it's
usually
something is
it's
like illegal.
sometimes it's something as simple as like, oh, my Cindy, my back office person, just didn't understand the process. We fixed it during onboarding, and then we don't have any problems from there. So very generous, very flexible, and
Yeah,
everything's
like I said, if
transparent
you
through the
don't
app.
care about your customer, if you put them out of business, then now you don't have a customer. So I mean, it's
We've
like
got
a human approach.
exactly. We've got carriers with us, dude, like from going back to 2018, which is like a significant number of them, 2018, 2019. These are companies that have grown to be pretty significant fleets over the years. And it's, as I've talked to other factoring companies, just networking more and more the last few years, it's very rare to even have a customer with somebody for more than 2 years. So
Yeah,
we
yeah,
do
dude.
our
I
best on
mean,
that stuff. I don't know if Alex froze or it's me. Hey,
hey man,
you
can you
back?
hear me?
Yeah, I didn't know if it was me or
Uh,
you, so I just
No,
stayed
I
here.
got some weather situations. I mean, maybe we got like 15 more minutes. This should hold
Yeah,
up,
yeah,
man.
we're almost there.
All right, cool,
Good
cool.
questions though. These are all good questions, and they're important to know when you're out there in the market for
Yeah,
factoring.
no, I
For
was
sure.
just gonna say that's like, I'm an avid factoring user. I mean, not anymore, but I was, and I've been through multiple factoring companies. And like, I wish I had knew about you guys. I would have told all my bosses like, yo, let's just go with these guys. They're like people, and they're humans. But I want to get into this topic because this is actually really interesting for this freight market that we're in. How do you guys mitigate the risk of shipper non-payment? Because I mean, dude, you know what the freight market's like right now.
Mm-hmm.
How do you guys kind of go about that? Is it just the vetting process?
Yeah, the vetting process is a big part of it. Like I said, there are cases more often with like a freight broker customer of ours where they say, "Hey, we know this is riskier. Can we just do this particular shipper on recourse terms, right? Because they may not be approved for us under non-recourse. So we do have that level of flexibility. That's
Pretty dope, man.
yeah, because a lot of most factors will say you're signed up for this. We built kind of our risk profile around this. We can't. It is what it is. Like you got to do the soft platform. So we really want you to keep as much of your payments, your workflow, and keep your life as easy as possible and keep as much on the platform as possible. So we'll usually work with you and extend some kind of recourse specific terms for specific shippers if we, for whatever reason, we can't get to the point where we can actually approve them on credit. Like I said, we're trying to do more with that in the back half of the year. But generally speaking, there's a lot of different aspects to reviewing a shipper, right? We do things like looking at years in business, even for the shipper. If they've moved lots of locations, do they have a parent company? Sometimes you may not be able to tell if they have a parent company, even with just some of the off-the-shelf credit searching software. So I think we're up to 5 different tools, various tools, and we've got a few others we're adding in the mix to just do our background research. Or if we get to an impasse, we're like, all right, well, we're still trying to figure out, does this other company really own them? We can go down the rabbit hole even more and get to get as close to a yes as we possibly can, or
it
to
just
some
makes me
amount of
laugh
credit.
because I was watching some movie recently and they were like, I think it was actually maybe a documentary, and they were trying to figure out who owned this company. Yeah, it was actually a really good documentary about like the food network of the world and how other
Right.
countries are like buying other countries' food and shipping it back. It was crazy documentary. But for about 20 minutes, they were going down this rabbit hole of like who owns this company. And it was like owned by like a shell of a shell of a shell of a shell. And like it took them like 4 years to figure out who owned the actual company. So just makes me laugh.
Well,
It's not always cut and dry, right?
That's one of the things that we had to get really good at over the years, especially as we started doing more and more broker factoring, is like, hey, who really is like the financial party on this bill, right? Because there could be multiple different layers of ownership,
and actually follow the money, and sometimes it's not easy.
No, and sometimes that works to your advantage because like I thought this was this little grower, but then it's actually owned by like some spinoff of like Dole Foods or something, right? So and then we're like, hey, we'll give you credit for this actually because it's gonna end up going back to them.
Pretty sure they're gonna pay in the end, bro.
Yeah, so I think having the ability to get into to actually see where the company really is owned, and like if we absolutely have to, we'll leave it up to the broker client or the carrier if it happens to be them as a customer to us and say, hey, can we reach out to them and request additional financial historical information, and then we can kind of go from there.
Cool, man. I mean, yeah, so the non-recourse thing. So I did know what it was, but I just didn't know what it was called. So that's cool. We've learned there. Mitigating the risk is also cool. I want to get into that with you since we mentioned it a bunch of times. How is HaulPay leveraging technology for invoicing payments? I know you can't give out the secret sauce, but can we touch on it?
Yeah, so all of the software is built by our development team that's HaulPay employees, right? So we were able to control quality control and kind of add features with a lot of detail, and we drive an iterative process with our customers for a lot of that development on the product, right? So that means meeting with key customers, sometimes even as much as weekly, and getting feedback on what features they want, or if they want iterations or tweaks to things, and that kind of drives the product, right? So customers have had a bigger part probably in building our software than just us coming up with ideas, especially over the last couple of years. But you have to have a thesis or something that again, like you mentioned, most of our team, exception of some of our software team, has worked in the industry, right? So we kind of know some of the pain points, like with what goes wrong with an invoice, or what goes wrong with extending credit, or not vetting a carrier payment or payee as a broker and getting burned on that end, right? So a lot of those potential kinks or issues with processes or friction points we've either experienced or we've gotten direct feedback from our customer to help us develop the software to address it. As far as specifically for invoice automation, collection, stuff like that, also been an iterative process, but it's just a part of the software workflow for an invoice, right? So automated emailing, automated scheduled remittances, different ways that shippers or brokers, depending on who's getting invoiced or paid, if it's a factor we're paying, can respond or opt into certain types of communication. Having gone through paying a lot of different types of factors and carriers and receiving payment from thousands and thousands of different brokers and shippers, we've kind of polished the format that kind of works the best across the whole industry for those types of communications. And really, at the end of the day, it's a credit risk issue, but it's really a lot of these things are really coming down to communication issues. And if you can make that communication really clear, and get the most accurate data to use to communicate, you're going to have the best outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, it always comes down to it in logistics. It's at the end of every conversation, like just communication. It always is what it is. If you're a broker, carrier, shipper, you just communicate effectively. It's always like solves most problems.
It's easier said than done, though, right?
Yeah. A lot of things in logistics, when you say it out loud, you're like, how is this even like a topic of conversation? But
sure.
when you actually put it into practice, it's very simple to see that people don't communicate effectively. So.
Yeah, and it gets, when you have an app like a product that we have, you can, and as you get people more accustomed to reviewing and seeing data in there, they get used to like noticing like, oh, that's a data that should be in this field. And we do a lot of API integration. I think that's something else that's really good to point out. Like, we really want to meet the client where they're used to operating and reduce the amount of switching between different platforms and apps as much as possible. So we lean very heavily and are going to continue to do so on integrating our HaulPay capabilities into existing TMSs to make their lives easier too.
I want to rapid fire through 3 questions. Then I got like 2 more long questions, but I want to rapid fire through this to segues into it. Are you guys integrated with multiple TMSs? If so, maybe can we name them?
Yeah, sure. So we've got Aljex, Quote Factory is another one. TIE TMS, great TMS.
I keep hearing about TIE. I gotta discover this TIE thing. This is like the 18th time I've heard that name in like the past 5 days.
Yeah, TIE TMS is great. There's another one. Hold on just a second. We've got like 3 more in process behind the scenes actually right now. So we're really pushing ahead.
You guys are leaning heavily into, like you said, not having 10 windows open to do the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, we also integrate with things like My Carrier Portal, RMIS, Highway, right, for brokers. So for freight brokers who are trying to onboard carriers to get paid, to pay those carriers, a lot of times they already have a setup with one of those carrier onboarding platforms, right? So we're integrated with platforms like that too. So as much as we can do to keep their to reduce the number of places they have to go and do the same task, we want them to do that one task where they're most comfortable doing it. We'll facilitate the financial transactions, the payment stuff, and whatever else they need us to do as a financial platform behind the scenes, if that's what's easiest for them.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, another quick question here. AI is kind of just cropping up everywhere. You see any use cases? Are you guys using any? I mean, do you think AI has a place in freight payment world?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of things that we're kind of piloting and playing around with have to do with, things like KYC and risk mitigation. So you're dealing with a lot of invoices that have a lot of different associated documents. And if you're not submitting the right documents, that creates a slowdown in the payment cycle, right? Like you were just mentioning, like getting paid by a shipper, right? Well, a lot of times shippers will take any excuse they can to slow pay, right? Not all the time, but same thing with certain brokers. So if you can make sure that doc set is accurate.
No, it's just so funny to me because there was a LinkedIn post from a very, very well-known carrier in our community. And he gave out, I think he gave out their contact info or just where they're operating. He's like, hey, if anybody wants a customer that takes 121 days to pay, hit them up. Absolutely.
Yeah, I know. You'd be surprised there are some very, very large blue chip companies that have some really crazy financial operating procedures that in some cases they will not pay faster than 110 or 120 days.
Yeah, they don't pay.
That's a huge company though. Are they paying so slow? It's that's just the way they want to run their behind the scenes.
What they want to do, bro. They have the money, they don't care.
So AI, if you want to call it AI, stuff like machine learning and that type of stuff gets more and more accessible and easier to implement inside of existing email or doc workflows and stuff like that. Definitely is something that we're starting to employ more. It helps kind of leverage speed up the process and eliminate errors more as we're doing more and more data.
There's definitely a place for it in large volume data, kind of
and you'll probably see some of your viewers, and you've probably seen it. You're going to see more. That's where it kind of is the obvious fit for logistics, I think. And we'll see more, I think, at least from my perspective, in trying to predict market conditions in certain regions. As the data sets get bigger that you can feed some of these models, you'll see other applications become more widespread.
Yeah, I mean, it has a use case for large volumes of data for sure. Does HaulPay own a brokerage?
No, good question.
No. Okay.
That's actually a great
sorry, I'm
point.
all over the place in my questions. I'm trying to get through everything here.
It's a great question, and we're one thing that is really worth considering if you are a freight broker is that there are a number of factors out there that are also freight brokerages. So if you're considering working with one, I would ask the factor if they are a freight broker, and then ask for a copy of their privacy policy, or how they are mitigating the leakage
Yeah,
of
I've
your
been
data.
hearing about this. I've been hearing about like this kind of backdooring conspiracy of factoring companies. Like they were not even making the money in the factoring; they're just backdooring people. I don't know. I don't know anything about this. It's a new conspiracy. It just crossed my desk about 2 weeks ago.
I've heard of this too. I'm not going to throw
I mean,
shade
it
on
makes sense when
anybody,
you
but
say it out loud. It makes sense. I mean,
it makes sense. Like, I've been a broker, right? I mean, a lot of our team has been brokers, and like we're sitting there like, man, that would be pretty cool if we were a friggin' broker, because like look at all the data we have, right? So
all
just
right, let's
something to
get
be
away from this topic. HaulPay does not own a brokerage. You're
No,
in
we do
safe
not. We do
hands.
not own a brokerage. We're a technology company that makes our money on the financial service side. But
Yeah,
if you are looking and shopping factors and you're a freight broker,
that's
I'd
my
highly
question.
recommend knowing whether or not they own a brokerage and what their privacy policy covers.
Yeah,
Make
we're
sure
not
you're safe.
implying anything. Just ask the questions, and viewer discussion is advised there. If a carrier or broker wants to get into the HaulPay system and leave their current factoring, how easy and how fast can that be done?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do pretty rapid things called buyouts. So basically, if you have accounts receivable, AR, basically invoices with your existing factoring company, you can come to us. We'll do a quick analysis on it. We'll tell you if we can buy out the AR, and we can usually turn around a quick analysis within like a 2 to 3 day period. And then if we can, we basically just start communicating with the other factor. As long as you're in a condition where you can exit your agreement, then we can basically wire the money to that factor. We take those invoices over onto our books, and then you start factoring as soon as that transaction's completed with us, and it's that
like
seamless. So
less than a business week, basically.
yeah, if everything's buttoned up, a week would be we've done them in a week. We've done them in a couple days. Some cases,
I mean, it depends on the operation, right? If they have
if it's
trucks,
messier and it's larger, it may take 2 weeks. I just want to manage expectations, but we're pretty fast. And
I mean, like most carriers are sub 10 trucks, most are sub 5 trucks. I mean, those are pretty simple situations.
Those are pretty simple, yeah. So I mean, again, you can get an idea of what it's going to take if you just come to us and get that process started without any obligation up front.
Yeah, so I mean, we've done a pretty good job at explaining HaulPay and what do you guys do better or different than your competition. I got to get through 2 or 3 questions with you very quickly here.
Sure.
What is your craziest logistics story? But it has to be very fast.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so basically I left C.H. Robinson and found out later that that there was like a theft ring, and it was still running in the LA area for years and years after I had been gone. And I hearing this from the grapevine through friends, and I'm like, dude, that's crazy that it took them that long to crack it. But I think it just was crazy that, like, from like 5 or 6 years later, I finally am hearing through the grapevine that they were able to bust this ring up. So if you guys have high value freight, just don't park it overnight by the Mexican border.
Yeah,
be really careful when you leave that
that
$500,000 trailer full of electronics.
Yeah, I mean, I always remember C.H. Robinson said, make sure your trailer doors are on a brick wall or you're in like a safe facility. I ran high value for them. It was always
they probably learned that from some of the accounts I used to manage.
Yeah, it might have happened a few times.
But yeah, I mean, it happens across the whole industry. But yeah, high value.
I like that clip. Don't worry, that's the first clip that's dropping tomorrow. Don't park your high value load at the Mexican border. That's tomorrow.
There you go.
All right, man. What is your favorite joke, if you even have one? Most people don't these days. If you have a joke, I'd love to hear it.
Like, That's probably the last thing I just gave you is probably
Okay,
a
yeah.
joke,
Don't park
actually.
your truck at the Mexican
Yeah.
border with
If it's a
$500K.
$500,000 electronics load, yeah,
All
there
right,
you go.
man. We got the absolute final question, and we're out of here. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's the segment Chicken Wing Choices, sponsored by Fair Trade Workforce, founder Vince Gonzalez. They offer nearshore employees at recession-proof rates. Regarding chicken wings, when you eat chicken wings, do you order drums or flats?
Usually drums.
Ranch or blue cheese for the dipping sauce?
Blue cheese, probably. Yeah.
And are they breaded or non-breaded?
I've been going non-bread lately, just lately though.
Nobody can get 3 out of 3. You just had to pick breaded, and you were in, bro. Like,
Ah,
you just screwed up right at the end. But you picked blue cheese.
I just changed my,
Thumbs up.
diet recently, man.
Yeah,
So
so did I actually. I eat literally eggs and chicken and vegetables every
there you
day.
go. I'm on the same thing, dude.
All right, man. Thank you for
Cool.
coming by. Thank you for
Absolutely.
explaining HaulPay to me. A little too late for me to use the product. I wish I had known about this, a couple of years ago. I would have definitely switched factoring. But have a good rest of your day, man. And we'll definitely
Thanks a lot, Alex. And for anyone else out there who wants to just get a second opinion and thinking if they want to move to another place, we're more than happy to take a look.
Podcast endorses HaulPay from what we've heard here today. So check them out and have a good rest of your day, Steve.
Thanks a lot.
That's it for episode 27 of podcast. Have a good night, everybody.